coming up.
Here we go, guys. Listen up. Here's the man.
RFK Jr.
Let's flip over. Smash that like.
Welcome so much for being here. I'd like to introduce everyone to bring on Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
I'm sorry to keep everybody waiting. 16 months ago, in April of 2023, I launched my campaign for President of the United States. I began this journey as a Democrat, the party of my father, my uncle, the party which I pledged my own allegiance to long before I was old enough to vote. I attended my first Democratic convention at the age of 6 in 1960. And back then, the Democrats were the champions of the Constitution, of civil rights. The Democrats stood against authoritarianism, against censorship, against colonialism, imperialism, and unjust wars. We were the party of labor, of the working class. The Democrats were the party of government transparency and the champion of the environment. Our party was the bulwark against big money interests and corporate power. True to its name, it was the party of democracy. As you know, I left that party in October because it had departed so dramatically from the core values that I grew up with. It had become the party of war, censorship, corruption, big pharma, big tech, big ag, and big money. When it abandoned democracy by canceling the primary to conceal the cognitive decline of the sitting president, I left the party to run as an independent. The mainstream of American politics and journalism derided my decision. Conventional wisdom said that it would be impossible even to get on the ballot as an independent because each state poses an insurmountable tangle of arbitrary rules for collecting signatures. I would need over 1 million signatures, something no presidential candidate in history had ever achieved. And then I'd need a team of attorneys and millions of dollars to handle all the legal challenges from the DNC. The naysayers told us that we were climbing a glass version of Mount Impossible. So the first thing I want to tell you is that we proved them wrong. We did it because beneath the radar of mainstream media organs, we inspired a massive independent political movement. More than 100,000 volunteers sprang into action, hopeful that they could reverse our nation's decline. Many worked 10-hour days, sometimes in blizzards and blazing heat. They sacrificed family time, personal commitments, and sleep month after month, energized by a shared vision of a nation healed of its divisions. They set up tables at churches and farmers' markets. They canvassed door to door. In Utah and in New Hampshire, volunteers collected signatures in snowstorms, convincing each supporter to stop in the frigid cold, to take off their gloves, and to sign legibly. During a heat wave in Nevada, I met a tall, athletic volunteer who cheerfully told me that he had lost 25 pounds collecting signatures in 117-degree heat. To finance this effort, young Americans donated their lunch money, and senior citizens gave up part of their Social Security checks. Our 50-state organization collected those millions of signatures and more. No presidential campaign in American political history has ever done that. And so I want to thank all of those dedicated volunteers and congratulate the campaign staff who coordinated this enormous logistical feat. Your accomplishments were regarded as impossible. You carried me up that glass mountain. You pulled off a miracle. You achieved what all the pundits said could never be done. You have my deepest gratitude, and I'm never going to forget that, not just for what you did for my campaign, but for the sacrifices you made because you love our country. You showed everyone that democracy is still possible here. It continues to survive in the press and in the idealistic human energies that still thrive beneath the canvas of neglect and of official and institutional corruption. Today, I'm here to tell you that I will not allow your efforts to go to waste. I'm here to tell you that I will leverage your tremendous accomplishments to serve the ideals that we share, the ideals of peace, of prosperity, of freedom, of health, all the ideals that motivated my campaign. I'm here today to describe the path forward that you've opened with your commitment and with your hard labors. Now, in an honest system, I believe that I would have won the election. In a system the kind that my father and my uncles thrived in, a system with open debates, with fair primaries, with regularly scheduled debates, with fair primaries, and with a truly independent media untainted by government propaganda and censorship. In a system of nonpartisan courts and election boards, everything would be different. After all, the polls consistently showed me beating each of the other candidates, both in favorability and also in head-to-head matchups. But I'm sorry to say that while democracy may still be alive at the grassroots, it has become little more than a slogan for our political institutions, for our media, and for our government, and most sadly at all for me, for the Democratic Party. In the name of saving democracy, the Democratic Party set itself to dismantling it, lacking confidence in its candidate, that its candidate could win in a fair election at the voting booth. The DNC waged continual legal warfare against both President Trump and myself. Each time that our volunteers turned in those towering boxes of signatures needed to get on the ballot, the DNC dragged us into court, state after state, attempting to erase their work and to subvert the will of the voters who had signed those petitions. It deployed DNC-aligned judges to throw me and other candidates off the ballot and to throw President Trump in jail. It ran a sham primary that was rigged to prevent any serious challenge to President Biden. Then, when a predictably bungled debate performance precipitated the palace coup against President Biden, the same shadowy DNC operatives appointed his successor, also without an election. They installed a candidate who was so unpopular with voters that she dropped out in 2020 without winning a single delegate. My uncle and my father both relished debate. They prided themselves on their capacity to go toe-to-toe with any opponent in the battle over ideas. They would be astonished to learn of a Democratic Party presidential nominee who, like Vice President Harris, has not appeared in a single interview or an unscripted encounter with voters for 35 days. This is profoundly undemocratic. How are people to choose when they don't know whom they are choosing? And how can this look to the rest of the world? My father and my uncle were always conscious of America's image abroad because of our nation's role as the template for democracy, the role model for democratic processes, and the leader of the free world. Instead of showing us her substance and character, the DNC and its media organs engineered a surge of popularity for Vice President Harris based upon, well, nothing. No policies, no interviews, no debates, only smoke and mirrors and balloons in a highly produced Chicago circus. There in Chicago, a string of Democratic speakers mentioned Donald Trump 147 times just on the first day. Oh, who needs a policy when you have Trump to hate? In contrast, at the RNC convention, President Biden was mentioned only twice in 4 days. I do interviews every day. Many of you have interviewed me. Anybody who asks gets to interview me. Some days I do as many as 10. President Trump, who actually was nominated and won an election, also does interviews daily. How did the Democratic Party choose a candidate that has never done an interview or debate during the entire election cycle? We know the answers. They did it by weaponizing the government agencies. They did it by abandoning democracy. They did it by suing the opposition and by disenfranchising American voters. What most alarms me isn't how the Democratic Party conducts its internal affairs or runs its candidates. What alarms me is the resort to censorship and media control and the weaponization of the federal agencies. When a U.S. president colludes with or outright coerces media companies to censor political speech, it's an attack on our most sacred right of free expression, and that's the very right upon which all of our other constitutional rights rest. President Biden mocked Vladimir Putin's 88% landslide in the Russian elections, observing that Putin and his party controlled the Russian press, and that Putin prevented serious opponents from appearing on the ballot. But here in America, the DNC also prevented opponents from appearing on the ballot. And our television networks expose themselves as Democratic Party organs. Over the course of more than a year, in a campaign where my poll numbers reached at times in the high 20s, the DNC-aligned mainstream media networks maintain a near perfect embargo on interviews with me. During his 10-month presidential campaign in 1992, Ross Perot gave 34 interviews on mainstream networks. In contrast, during the 16 months since I declared, ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, and CNN combined gave only 2 live interviews from me. Those networks instead ran a continuous deluge of hit pieces with inaccurate, often vile, pejoratives and defamatory smears. Some of those same networks and colluded with the DNC to keep me off the debate stage. Representatives of those networks are in this room right now, and I'll just take a moment to ask you to consider the many ways that your institutions have abdicated this really sacred responsibility, the duty of a free press to safeguard democracy and to challenge always the party in power. Instead of maintaining that posture of fierce skepticism toward authority, your institutions have made themselves government mouthpieces and stenographers for the organs of power. You didn't alone cause the devolution of American democracy, but you could have prevented it. The Democratic Party's censorship of social media was even more of a naked exercise of executive power. This week, a federal judge, Terry Doty, upheld my injunction against President Biden, calling the White House's censorship project, quote, the most egregious violation of the First Amendment in the history of the United States of America. Doty's previous 155-page decision details how just 37 hours after he took the oath of office, swearing to uphold the Constitution, President Biden and his White House opened up a portal and then invited the CIA, the FBI, CISA, which is a censorship agency, it's the center of the censorship industrial complex, DHS, the IRS, and other agencies to censor me and other political dissidents on social media. Even today, users who try to post my campaign videos to Facebook or YouTube get messages that this content violates community standards. 2 days after Judge Doty rendered his decision this week, Facebook was still attaching warning labels to an online petition calling on ABC to include me in the upcoming debate. They said that violates community standards, their community standards. The mainstream media was once the guardian of the First Amendment and democratic principles, and it's joined this systemic attack on democracy. It also, the media justifies their censorship on the grounds of combating misinformation, but governments and oppressors don't censor lies. They don't fear lies. They fear the truth, and that's what they censor. And I don't want any of this to sound like a personal complaint, because it's not. For me, it's all part of a journey, and it's a journey that I signed up with. But I need to make these observations because I think they're critical for us doing the thing that we need to do as citizens in a democracy to assess where we are in this country and what our democracy still looks like, and the assumptions about U.S. leadership around the globe. And are we living up? Are we really still a role model for democracy in this country? Or have we made it, a kind of a joke? And here's the good news. While mainstream outlets denied me a critical platform, they didn't shut down my ideas, which have especially flourished among young voters and independent voters, thanks to the alternative media. Many months ago, I promised the American people that I would withdraw from the race if I became a spoiler. A spoiler is someone who will alter the outcome of the election but has no chance of winning. In my heart, I no longer believe that I have a realistic path to electoral victory in the face of this relentless, systematic censorship and media control. So I cannot in good conscience ask my staff and volunteers to keep working their long hours or ask my donors to keep giving when I cannot honestly tell them that I have a real path to the White House. Furthermore, our polling consistently showed that by staying on the ballot in the battleground states, I would likely hand the election over to the Democrats, with whom I disagree on the most existential issues: censorship, war, and chronic disease. I want everyone to know that I am not terminating my campaign. I am simply suspending it and not ending it. My name will remain on the ballot in most states. If you live in a blue state, you can vote for me without harming or helping President Trump or Vice President Harris. In red states, the same will apply. I encourage you to vote for me. And if enough of you do vote for me, and neither of the major party candidates win 270 votes, which is quite possible, in fact, today our polling shows them tying at 269 to 269, and I could conceivably still end up in the White House in a contingent election. But in about 10 battleground states where my presence would be a spoiler, I'm going to remove my name. And I've already started that process and urge voters not to vote for me. It's with a sense of victory and not defeat that I'm suspending my campaign activities. Not only did we do the impossible by collecting 1 million signatures, we changed the national political conversation forever. Chronic disease, free speech, government corruption, breaking our addiction to war have moved to the center of politics. I can say to all who have worked so hard the last year and a half, thank you for a job well done. 3 great causes drove me to enter this race in the first place, primarily. And these are the principal causes that persuaded me to leave the Democratic Party and run as an independent. And now to throw my support to President Trump. The causes were free speech, the war in Ukraine, and the war on our children. I've already described some of my personal experiences and struggles with the government's censorship industrial complex. I want to say a word about the Ukraine war. The military-industrial complex has provided us with a familiar comic book justification, like they do on every war, that this one is a noble effort to stop a supervillain, Vladimir Putin, from invading the Ukraine and then to thwart his Hitler-like march across Europe. In fact, tiny Ukraine is a proxy in a geopolitical struggle initiated by the ambitions of the U.S. neocons for American global hegemony. I'm not excusing Putin for invading Ukraine. He had other options. But the war is Russia's predictable response to the reckless neocon project of extending NATO to encircle Russia, a hostile act. The credulous media rarely explain to Americans that we unilaterally walked away from 2 intermediate nuclear weapons treaties with Russia and then put nuclear-ready Aegis missile systems in Romania and Poland. This is a hostile act. And that the Biden White House repeatedly spurned Russia's offer to settle this war peacefully. The Ukraine war began in 2014 when U.S. agencies overthrew the democratically elected government of Ukraine and installed a hand-picked pro-Western government that launched a deadly civil war against ethnic Russians in Ukraine. In 2019, America walked away from a peace treaty, the Minsk Agreement, that had been negotiated between Russia and Ukraine by European nations. And then in April of 2022, we wanted the war. In April of 2022, President Biden sent Boris Johnson to Ukraine to force President Zelensky to tear up a peace agreement that he and the Russians had already signed, and the Russians were withdrawing troops from Kiev and Donbass and Lugansk. And that peace agreement would have brought peace to the region and would have allowed Donbass and Lugansk to remain part of Ukraine. President Biden stated that month that his objective in the war was regime change in Russia. His Defense Secretary, Lloyd Austin, simultaneously explained that America's purpose in the war was to exhaust the Russian army, to degrade its capacity to fight anywhere else in the world. These objectives, of course, have nothing to do with what they were telling Americans about protecting Ukraine's sovereignty. Ukraine is a victim in this war, and it's a victim of the West. Since then, of Russia and both Russia and the West. Since then, we have, since tearing up that agreement, forcing Zelensky to tear up the agreement, we've squandered the flower of Ukrainian youth, as many as 600,000 Ukrainian kids and over 100,000 Russian kids, all of whom we should be mourning, have died, and the Ukraine's infrastructure is destroyed. The war has been a disaster for our country as well. We squandered nearly $200 billion already, and these are badly needed dollars in our communities, suffering communities all over our country. The Nord Stream pipeline sabotage and the sanctions have destroyed Europe's industrial base, which formed the bulwark of U.S. national security. A strong Germany with a strong industry is a much stronger deterrent to Russia, and a Germany that is deindustrialized and turned into just an extension of a U.S. military base. We've pushed Russia into a disastrous alliance with China and Iran. We're closer to the brink of nuclear exchange than at any time since 1962. And the neocons in the White House don't seem to care at all. Our moral authority and our economy are in shambles. And the war gave rise to the emergence of BRICS, which now threatens to replace the dollar as the global reserve currency. This is a first-class calamity for our country. Judging by her bellicose, belligerent speech last night in Chicago, we can assume that President Harris will be an enthusiastic advocate for this and other neocon military adventures. And President Trump says that he will reopen negotiations with President Putin and end the war overnight as soon as he becomes president. This alone would justify my support for his campaign. Last summer, it looked like no candidate was willing to negotiate a quick end to the Ukraine war, to tackle chronic disease epidemic, to protect free speech, our constitutional freedoms, to clean corporate influence out of our government, or to defy the neocons and their agenda of endless military adventurism. But now one of the two candidates has adopted these issues as his own, to the point where he has asked to enlist me in his administration. I'm speaking, of course, of Donald Trump. Less than 2 hours after President Trump narrowly escaped assassination, Callie Means called me on my cell phone. I was then in Las Vegas. Callie is arguably the leading advocate for food safety, for soil regeneration, and for ending the chronic disease epidemic that is destroying America's health and ruining our economy. Callie has exposed the insidious corruption at the FDA, the NIH, the HHS, and the USDA that has caused the epidemic. Callie had been working on and off for my campaign, advising me on those subjects since the beginning. And those subjects have been my primary focus for the last 20 years. I was delighted when Callie told me that day that he had also been advising President Trump. He told me President Trump was anxious to talk to me about chronic disease and other subjects, and to explore avenues of cooperation. He asked if I would take a call from the president. President Trump telephoned me a few minutes later, and I met with him the following day. A few weeks later, I met again with President Trump and his family members and closest advisors in Florida. In a series of long, intense discussions, I was surprised to discover that we are aligned on many key issues. In those meetings, he suggested that we join forces as a unity party. We talked about Abraham Lincoln's team of rivals. That arrangement would allow us to disagree publicly and privately, and fiercely if need be, on issues over which we differ, while working together on the existential issues upon which we are in concordance. I was a ferocious critic of many of the policies during his first administration, and there are still issues and approaches upon which we continue to have very serious differences. But we are aligned with each other on other key issues, like ending the forever wars, ending the childhood disease epidemics, securing the border, protecting freedom of speech, unraveling the corporate capture of our regulatory agencies, getting the U.S. intelligence agencies out of the business of propagandizing and censoring and surveilling Americans and interfering with our elections. Following my first discussion with President Trump, I tried unsuccessfully to open similar discussions with Vice President Harris. Vice President Harris declined to meet or even to speak with me. Suspending my candidacy is a heart-rending decision for me, but I'm convinced that it's the best hope for ending the Ukraine war and ending the chronic disease epidemic that is eroding our nation's vitality from the inside, and for finally protecting free speech. I feel a moral obligation to use this opportunity to save millions of American children, above all things. In case some of you don't realize how dire the condition is of our children's health and chronic disease in general, I would urge you to view Dr. Carlson's recent interview with Callie Means and his sister, Dr. Casey Means, who is the top graduate of her class at Stanford Medical School. This is an issue that affects all of us far more directly and urgently than any culture war issue and all the other issues that we obsess on and that are tearing apart our country. This is the most important issue. Therefore, it has the potential to bring us together. So let me share a little bit about why I believe it's so urgent. Today, 2/3, we spend more on healthcare than any country on earth, twice what they pay in Europe. And yet we have the worst health outcomes of any nation in the world. We're about 79th in health outcomes behind Costa Rica and Nicaragua and Mongolia and other countries. Nobody has a chronic disease burden like we have. And during the COVID epidemic, we had the highest body count of any country in the world. We had 16% of the COVID deaths, and we only have 4.2% of the world's population. And CDC says that's because we are the sickest people on earth. We have the highest chronic disease rate on earth. And the average American who died from COVID had 3.8 chronic diseases. So these were people who had immune system collapse, who had mitochondrial dysfunction. And no other country has anything like this. 2/3 of American adults and children suffer from chronic health issues. 50 years ago, that number was less than 1%. So we've gone from 1% to 66%. In America, 74% of Americans are now overweight or obese, and 50% of our children. 120 years ago, when somebody was obese, they were sent to the circus. There were case reports done about them. Obesity was almost unknown. In Japan, the childhood obesity rate is 3% compared to 50% here. Half of Americans have pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes. When my uncle was president and I was a boy, juvenile diabetes was effectively non-existent. A typical pediatrician would see one case of diabetes during his entire career, a 40 or 50-year career. Today, 1 out of every 3 kids who walks through his office door is diabetic or pre-diabetic. And the mitochondrial disorder that caused diabetes also causing Alzheimer's, which is now classified as diabetes. And it's costing this country more than our military budget every year. There's been an explosion of neurological illnesses that I never saw as a kid: ADD, ADHD, speech delay, language delay, Tourette's syndrome, narcolepsy, ASD, Asperger's, autism. In the year 2000, the autism rate was 1 in 1,500. Now, autism rates in kids are 1 in 36, according to CDC nationally. Nobody's talking about this. 1 in every 22 kids in California has autism. And this is a crisis that 77% of our kids are too disabled to serve in the United States military. What is happening to our country? And why isn't this in the headlines every single day? There's nobody else in the world that is experiencing this. This is only happening in America. About 18%, and by the way, there has been no change in diagnosis, which the industry sometimes like to say. There has been no change in screening. This is a change in incidence. In my generation, 70-year-old men, the autism rates are about 1 in 10,000. In my kids' generation, 1 in 34. I'll repeat, in California, 1 in 22. Why are we letting this happen? Why are we allowing this to happen to our children? These are the most precious assets that we have in this country. How can we let this happen to them? About 18% of American teens now have fatty liver disease. That's like 1 out of every 5. That disease, when I was a kid, only affected late-stage alcoholics who were elderly. Cancer rates are skyrocketing in the young and the old. Young adult cancers are up 79%. 1 in 4 American women is on antidepressant medication. 40% of teens have a mental health diagnosis. And 15% of high schoolers are on Adderall, and 500,000 children on SSRIs. So what's causing this suffering? I'll name 2 culprits. First, and the worst, is ultra-processed food. About 70% of American children's diet is ultra-processed. That means industrial manufactured in a factory. These foods consist primarily of processed sugar, ultra-processed grains, and seed oils. Laboratory scientists who many of them formerly worked for the cigarette industry, which purchased all the big food companies in the 1970s and 80s, deployed thousands of scientists to figure out new chemicals to make the food more addictive. And these ingredients didn't exist 100 years ago. Humans aren't biologically adapted to eat them. Hundreds of these chemicals are now banned in Europe, but ubiquitous in American processed foods. The second culprit is toxic chemicals in our food, our medicine, and our environment. Pesticides, food additives, pharmaceutical drugs, and toxic waste permeate every cell of our bodies. The assault on our children's cells and hormones is unrelenting. To name just one problem, many of these chemicals increase estrogen because young children are ingesting so many of these hormone disruptors. America's puberty rate is now occurring at age 10 to 13, which is 6 years earlier than girls were reaching puberty in 1900. Our country has the earliest puberty rates of any continent on the earth. And no, this isn't because of better nutrition. This is not normal. Breast cancer is also estrogen driven, and it now strikes 1 in 8 women. We are mass poisoning all of our children and our adults. Considering the grievous human cost of this tragedy, at least $4 trillion, 5 times our military budget. And that's a 20% drag on everything we do and everything we aspire to. Poor and minority communities suffer disproportionately. People who worry about DEI or about bigotry of any kind, this dwarfs anything. We are poisoning the poor. We are systematically poisoning minorities across this country. Industry lobbyists have made sure that most of the food stamp lunch program, about 70% of food stamps and about 70 or 77% of school lunches are processed foods. There's no vegetables. There's nothing that you would want to eat. We are just poisoning the poor citizens, and that's why they have the highest chronic disease burden of anybody, any demographic in our country, and the highest in the world. The same food industry lobbied to make sure that nearly all agricultural subsidies go to commodity crops that are the feedstock of processed food industry. These policies are destroying small farms, and they're destroying our soils. We give about, I think, 8 times as much in subsidies to tobacco than we do to fruits and vegetables. It makes no sense. If we want a healthy country, the good news is that we can change all this. We can change it very, very quickly. America can get healthy again. To do that, we need to do 3 things. First, we need to root out the corruption in our health agencies. Second, we need to change incentives in our healthcare system. And third, we need to inspire Americans to get healthy again. 80% of NIH grants go to people who have conflicts of interest. These are the people, virtually everybody who sits, Joe Biden just appointed a new panel to NIH to decide the food recommendations. And they're all people who are from the industry. They're all people who are from the processed food companies. They're deciding what Americans, hear is healthy. And the recommendations on the food pyramid and what goes to our school lunch programs, what go to the program, the Swiss program, the food stamp programs. They're all corrupted and conflicted individuals. These agencies, the FDA, USDA, and CDC, all of them are controlled by giant for-profit corporations. 75% of the FDA's funding doesn't come from taxpayer, it comes from pharma. And pharma executives and consultants and lobbyists cycle in and out of these agencies with President Trump's backing. I'm going to change that. We're going to staff these agencies with honest scientists and doctors who are free from industry funding. We're going to make sure the decisions of consumers, doctors, and patients are informed by unbiased science. A sick child is the best thing for the pharmaceutical industry. When American children or adults get sick with a chronic condition, they're put on medication for their entire life. Imagine what will happen when Medicare starts paying for Ozempic, which costs $1,500 a month, and it's being recommended for children as young as 6, all for a condition, obesity, that is completely preventable and barely even existed 100 years ago. And 74% of Americans are obese. The cost, if all of them took their Ozempic prescription, is $3 trillion a year. This is a drug that is made by Novo Nordisk, the biggest company in Europe. It's a Danish company, and the Danish government does not recommend it. It recommends change in diet to treat obesity and exercise. And in our country, the recommendation now is for Ozempic to children at age 6. Novo Nordisk, the biggest company in Europe, and virtually its entire value is based upon its projections of what it's going to sell, of the Ozempic it's going to sell to America. And we have the food lobbyists have a bill in front of Congress today that is backed by the White House, backed by Vice President Harris and President Biden, to allow this to happen. This $3 trillion cost that is going to bankrupt our country. For a fraction of that amount, we could buy organic food for every American family, 3 meals a day, and eliminate diabetes altogether. We're going to bring healthy food back to school lunches. We're going to stop subsidizing the worst foods with our agricultural subsidies. We're going to get toxic chemicals out of our food. We're going to reform the entire food system. And for that, we need new leadership in Washington. Because unfortunately, both the Democrats and the Republican parties are in cahoots with the big food producers, Big Pharma and Big Ag, which are among the DNC's major donors. Vice President Harris has expressed no interest in addressing this issue. 4 more years of Democratic rule will complete the consolidation of corporate and neocon power, and our children will be the ones who suffer most. I got involved with chronic disease 20 years ago, not because I chose to or wanted to. It was essentially thrust upon me. It was an issue that should have been central to the environmental movement. I was a central leader at that time. But it was widely ignored by all the institutions, including the NGOs, who should have been protecting our kids against toxins. It was an orphaned issue, and I had a weakness for orphans. I watched generations of children get sicker and sicker. I had 11 siblings, and I had 7 kids myself. I was conscious of what was happening in their classrooms and to their friends, and I watched these sick kids, these damaged kids. In that generation, almost all of them are damaged. And nobody in power seemed to care or to even notice. For 19 years, I prayed every morning that God would put me in a position to end this calamity. The chronic disease crisis was one of the primary reasons for my running for president, along with ending censorship in the Ukraine war. It's the reason I've made the heart-wrenching decision to suspend my campaign and to support President Trump. This decision is agonizing for me because of the difficulties it causes my wife and my children and my friends. But I have the certainty that this is what I've meant to do. And that certainty gives me internal peace, even in storms. If I'm given the chance to fix the chronic disease crisis and reform our food production, I promise that within 2 years, we will watch chronic disease burden lift dramatically. We will make Americans healthy again. Within 4 years, America will be a healthy country. We will be stronger, more resilient, more optimistic, and happier. I won't fail in doing this. Ultimately, the future, however it happens, is in God's hands and in the hands of the American voters and those of President Trump. If President Trump is elected and honors his word, the vast burden of chronic disease that now demoralizes and bankrupts the country will disappear. This is a spiritual journey for me. I reached my decision through deep prayer, through hard-nosed logic, and I asked myself, what choices must I make to maximize my chances to save America's children and restore national health? I felt that if I refused this opportunity, I would not be able to look myself in the mirror, knowing that I could have saved lives of countless children and reversed this country's chronic disease epidemic. I'm 70 years old. I may have a decade to be effective. I can't imagine that President Harris would allow me or anyone to solve these dire problems. After 8 years of President Harris, any opportunity for me to fix the problem will be out of my reach forever. President Trump has told me that he wants this to be his legacy. I'm choosing to believe that this time he will follow through. His son, his biggest donors, his closest friends, and all support this objective. My joining the Trump campaign will be a difficult sacrifice for my wife and children, but worthwhile if there's even a small chance of saving these kids. Ultimately, the only thing that will save our country and our children is if we choose to love our kids more than we hate each other. That's why I launched my campaign to unify America. My dad and uncle made such an enduring mark on the character of our nation, not so much because of any particular policies that they promoted, but because they were able to inspire profound love for our country and to fortify our sense of ourselves as a national community held together by ideals. They were able to put their love into the intentions and hearts of ordinary Americans and to unify a national populist movement of Americans, Blacks and whites, Hispanics, urban and rural Americans. They inspired affection and love and high hopes and a culture of kindness that continue to radiate among Americans from their memory. That's the spirit on which I ran my campaign and that I intend to bring into the campaign of President Trump. Instead of vitriol and polarization, I will appeal to the values that unite us, the goals that we could achieve if only we weren't at each other's throats. The most unifying theme for all Americans is that we all love our children. If we all unite around that issue now, we can finally give them the protection, the health, and the future that they deserve. Thank you all very much.
Wow. Wow. That, guys, I'm honestly like speechless. That's, listening to him say this is so cathartic. Absolutely epic, guys. Let's pop over here to Donald Trump really quick and see what he's saying over here.
Because, you know, they're great people.
Guess we'll have a 2-for-1 right now. We'll listen to him for a little bit.
Head of, you know, like a Democrat, the head, even if the Republican's better, and a lot of the Republicans aren't better, but I'm a lot better. And I'm the one that got this thing done. And so if we could speak to the head guy, let him, it'd be nice and easy, just relax. We're going to win. The state is looking very good. We just got a poll. We're leading by a lot.
See if he mentions RFK.
Culinary Union. How many members of the Culinary Union are here? Oh, you have a lot. I can tell you have a lot. But I think a lot of them, we had a poll done, and a lot of them are voting for us, I can tell you right now. But people that depend on tip income for our family. So, Nicole, if I could ask you to come up and say a few words. Hi, Nicole.
Hi, Mr.
Please.
Trump.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Thank you. This is the honor of my life to be up here with my favorite president. And his no tax on tips policy is going to help my family. It's going to bring immediate relief to my pocketbook and my 7 kids. And all of you here who have children and families to take care of, This is going to be a great thing for all of us. So let's get out and vote for President Trump. Let's win Nevada for President Trump. Let's get out there. Register all your friends and family. Tell everybody about this policy.
Really quick, guys, I wanted to show you guys this. So someone posted this on X. So apparently, I'll pop back to that here in just a second. But apparently CNN and MSNBC cut away from RFK Jr. while he was making these remarks about the absolute evilness of the mainstream media and how they are essentially paid propaganda for the Democrat Party. This is the look on MSNBC, and then I got another one for CNN. Watch.
Where Kennedy is expected to say publicly what he's already made official in a court filing, that he will endorse Donald Trump. Perhaps no coincidence, Trump is set to hold a campaign rally tonight with a special unnamed guest in Glendale, Arizona. That's just 20 minutes from where RFK is right now. Joining me now, New York Times investigator.
So, let's see.
Pictures from Phoenix, Arizona.
So they must have just cut away and just started commenting on it.
From Phoenix, Arizona, where Kennedy is expected to say publicly.
This X account in wokeness says CNN and MSNBC cut away from the RFK announcement. They are panicking. Let's see what this one shows. This is CNN.
And relinquishing the title of Democrat, he had a series of complaints about the party. We're, of course, going to continue watching his remarks. There's a back and forth over whether he's going to endorse former President Donald Trump. We're going to break that down on the other side of a quick break. Stay with CNN.
So apparently, whenever he started talking about that stuff, they just cut away from him. That's what I'm seeing on X. But let's pop back over here to Donald Trump. He's giving remarks on the no tax on tip policy. And let me make sure I'm live here. We're live. Roll plus play, guys. We'll listen to this, and then we'll hop off here. But man, I'm still thinking of that RFK Jr. speech. That's
did that. If they do
brilliant.
Polls and they do studies, she's considered to be the worst vice president in history. 6 weeks ago, they were laughing at her. She was a joke, and now she got the nomination. She didn't get any votes, but she got the nomination. Explain that one. But I understand that Javier has something he would like to say about that, and so I'll ask Javier to come up and say a couple of words. Thank you. About the meeting you had with Joe.
Oh, thank you for being here, President Donald Trump. Me and my family really appreciate that you guys give us the opportunity to host this event, so important. And I was telling them earlier, before you got here, that I came when Ronald Reagan was the president. And you know what? I really miss those times. So I need you to please make America great again.
Thanks, Javier. Thank you. And we will. We will. You got a good sample.
My daughter over there,
Yes.
and she agrees with you 100%.
Good.
My daughter over there,
let's go.
she really thinks that you are cuter than Kamala.
She thinks he's cuter than Kamala. Let's go. Let's go.
Agree on. That's very nice. Thank you very much.
I do too.
Appreciate it. Great job you did.
No homo.
So thank you to Javier, to everybody under my leadership. Our Latino American community has prospered like, as you know, and as he knows, prospered like never before. Yeah. And you know, we're winning. We won places. The governor of Texas called me. The last election, we won every border town along the border, and they're almost entirely Hispanic. And we won all of them. We won the votes. First time, they said, since Reconstruction. So I said, when you say Reconstruction, you know, that's a little complicated word in a sense, because it means a lot of things to a lot of people. But I said, that means a civil war. Is that what you're referring to? That's right. Since the Civil War, that's never happened. And we did it twice. We did it in 16, and we did even better in 20. We actually did much better in 20 than we did in 16. But lots of strange things happen in life, right? But we're doing better now than either of those two. There's more spirit. I mean, you look at outside in the street.
Man, his audio quality just sucks, doesn't it? Let me see if I can find a better feed for you guys, because this is just ridiculous right now.
Just too many people, but you're going to see.
Give me a quick second. I'm going to throw on RSBN maybe.
All-time high under the Trump administration. Hispanic American unemployment rate hit the lowest it's ever hit. Lowest ever.
All right, guys, coming up. Here we go.
Reached a record low, the lowest number ever. It was a leaker, and by the way, leaker, a patriot leaker.
There. Much better, right?
And that's not a revision. You know, that usually they call that a revision, like there's, 10,000 jobs. This is 818. I think it was the biggest number, certainly in memory. 818,000 fake jobs they reported. They don't exist. Total fake job. And this is what we're dealing with. And that's at a big number. That's a big, big downward number, in other words, on their reporting. But they reported these jobs, and now they've had to revise it and take them off the books. More than 1.5 million Hispanic Americans were lifted out of poverty during my administration, and the household wealth of the median Hispanic family grew by 65%. That's a lot, Javier. 65. It makes sense, right? Now it's heading south, by the way, just in case but we'll get it back up fast. The Hispanic American high school graduation rate reached an all-time high, and home ownership among Hispanics also hit a record high. And for working families and small businesses like this one, this is not a small business, this is a big business, but we'll call it a small business for tax purposes, okay? We delivered the largest tax cuts and regulation cuts in the history of our country. We achieved energy independence, and we built the greatest economy any time in the history of the world. It was the strongest economy anybody had ever seen. Under Kamala, it has been one disaster after another. Take a look at the border. You want to really see a disaster. I was there yesterday. What a disaster. After Kamala cast the tie-breaking votes on the bills that caused the worst inflation in decades, the Harris price hikes have cost the typical Nevada family. And you take a look. So the Nevada family spent $32,000 more under this horrible regime of people that don't know what the hell they're doing. Now Kamala is promising communist price controls on food. Her plan will cause catastrophic inflation, shortages of rationing. The restaurant industry will be obliterated. And I say welcome to 1929. Do you know what 1929 was? You don't want to know, right? You don't want to know, but that's where they're headed if they do what they're planning. Kamala is also pledging the largest tax hikes in American history, and Las Vegas hospitality industry would actually never recover from that. It's the largest tax hikes in history. And, you heard her words last night. She doesn't talk about that. You notice they talked, I guess she mentioned the Trump name many, many times, like 19 or 21 or something. She didn't mention the border. She didn't mention inflation. She didn't mention the bad economy. She didn't mention crime. She didn't mention any of the things that she's supposed to be mentioning. But she mentioned Trump 21 times or some crazy thing. And she mentioned thank you about 50 times. Did you see the beginning? Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you.
It was odd. I saw that. I noticed that too.
Thank you. I said, what the hell is wrong with her?
The media is going to clip that out.
She did much better, but she didn't tell anything. She didn't say anything. She talked about her family, how beautiful San Francisco was. I put out a note. I said, well, the word "was" is very important, because what the hell happened? Under her, as district attorney, she destroyed San Francisco, and then as the attorney general, she ruined the state of California with her stupid policies. But she was showing her beautiful life in San Francisco, and everybody was joking. That was before she destroyed it. She's supported the idea of a 70 to 80% tax hike. I don't think the man behind me will be happy. You wouldn't mind paying 80% in taxes, would you? What the hell? He says, whatever's good for America, right? 80% tax rate, and now she's even pushing a tax on unrealized capital gains. In other words, the appraisers are going to make a lot of money. which will soon be applied to small business owners, and you will be forced to sell your restaurant immediately, and the new owner won't do the job, and this restaurant will be closed. But we're not going to let that happen, Javier. We're going to make it bigger, better, stronger, just like the country. So this is really beyond social, because she's a socialist, but she's really a Marxist. A Marxist is a step beyond. Remember how you said at the State of the Union, we will not have socialism in America. We will never be a socialist country. I was right. We skipped over socialism. We're down to communism, okay?
So I'm waiting until the end where the press, I'm sure there's press there, they're going to ask him about RFK Jr.'s endorsement. So hang in there. I'm interested to see what he says.
But this is beyond socialism. This is the beginning of communism, and it really is, and we can't let that happen. You look at Venezuela, you look at some of these countries that we all know so well, and what happened to them can happen to us. It's just a bigger version. That's where we're headed if this group gets elected. But we'll not let Kamala and the group turn America into a communist nation. We're not going to let it happen. We can't let it happen. I'll cut taxes, and what we're doing is we're cutting taxes, regulations. We're going to defeat inflation, rapidly bring prices down, and make America affordable again. It's not affordable. People can't buy, as Javier said before, they can't buy sneakers, they can't buy anything. To help seniors, we will have no tax on Social Security benefits. That's a big deal. I don't know. I'm trying to figure for restaurant workers, and all workers, tip workers, it's no tax on tips, but the Social Security, no tax, because they've driven them out of business. These people have suffered, and they've done things the right way. They've saved, and then the inflation destroyed them. And we're going to have no tax on Social Security benefits, and that's a big thing, and it's very important. Just as important is what I said before about the no tax on tips. Kamala wants to bring sky-high California energy prices to the rest of the country, and they have just destroyed California. First time ever, more people left California than came in. They've never had that before because they have the best weather, the most beautiful land. Everything is so good, but they have a terrible governor. He doesn't know what the hell he's doing, but he's got a great line of bullshit, you know? He's got a good line of stuff. We're doing great in California. You know the U-Haulets and the trailers and stuff? They go to Texas, Florida, other states, right? And they don't know what to do. They only go one way. They want to try and get them. They want to try and get them back. They have a hard time bringing them back. They don't know what to do. But under the extremist net zero energy policies, what you call them, the extremist, the radical people, they're really hurting our country and ultimately destroying our country. The environmental extremists, we call them. Nevada electricity prices have already increased by 50%. So it's 50%. Do you see them going up there? I mean, do you see that? They've gone up by 50% over a very short period of time, and I'll unleash American energy, and we'll cut your prices in half. We'll be able to get your energy prices cut in half, and that goes for the whole nation. That's ridiculous that they've increased that much, and you see that. Well, that's terrible. I'll deliver universal school choice, letting your child go to the public, private, religious, charter school of your choice, the family's choice, and it's something. School choice is a big deal. It's a big deal. Everybody wants school choice. And I'll support our police and stop the crime wave that was caused by this woman. What she's done on the border, she was the border czar. She doesn't want to talk about it. She said, I'm not the border czar. For 4 years, she's the border czar. Now she's not the border czar all of a sudden. You know why? Because people are coming in at levels that nobody's ever seen before. They're coming in by the millions, and they're coming from jails and prisons. They're slightly different meaning. They're coming from mental institutions and insane asylums. They're emptying out so many of their cities of criminals, and they're busing them into the good old USA. They're busing the worst gang members, the worst drug dealers, terrorists, and they're bringing them in and dropping them here, and they're saying, if you come back, we're going to kill you. We're going to kill you if you come back, or we'll give you the death penalty, but we're going to kill you if you come back. So they're dropping their criminals here. They're emptying their jails and dumping everybody. And these are tough people, too. And they're dumping them into our country. And you take a look at the prison populations all over the world. We're not just talking about South America. All over the world, the Congo in Africa. Many people are coming out of the Congo, and they're coming from jails in the Congo. So their jails are being emptied. The mental institutions are being emptied. And they're all coming to the USA. There'll be customers very shortly of Javier's fine restaurant. What's happening is horrible. It's horrible. And they're destroying our country. And we're going to do the largest deportation in the history of America. We have no choice. We have no choice. And you see the death. You see the death and destruction they're causing. I was at the border yesterday with some people whose families were just obliterated by these horrible, horrible people that have been allowed to come in. And remember, terrorists are coming in at levels we've never seen before. Only bad things can happen. So I'll secure the border, keep radical Islamic terrorists out of our country, and we will do something that's very important. I will prevent World War III. You have World War III is on the cusp. You take a look at what's happening. Biden didn't have a clue what he did with Russia and Ukraine, what that happened. That's a war that should have never started. If I were president, zero chance that would have happened. It would have never, and it didn't for 4 years. Same thing with Israel. October 7th would have never happened. And you know what else? You wouldn't have had that horror show, the most embarrassing day in our history, Afghanistan. And very importantly, you wouldn't have had inflation, because inflation was caused by energy. Now it's caused by everything. And the prices are so high that people are being driven out of business, including a lot of Hispanic people, a lot of black people. What's happening with the black population is they're losing their jobs to the people that are pouring across the border. The black population is being decimated. You wait till you see the real numbers that come. They're losing their jobs because Biden and Harris are allowing millions of people to come into our country, and they're taking black people's jobs, African American jobs. They're taking those jobs, and a lot of those jobs are Hispanic jobs too. And the next thing that's going to be hit, I can tell you union leaders, the unions are going to be hit really, really hard. So I just want to end by saying that November 5th is a very important day. I believe it will go down as the most important day in the history of our country. That means you have to vote. It's going to be a big vote. If we win this state, if we win Nevada, we're going to win something that's going to be very, very special. We're going to win the whole thing. If we win Nevada, we're going to win the whole thing. And I don't know how the hell we can lose it. I've never seen such support, the support we have. So to Javier and his family, it's nice. Thank you. Thank you very much. I like that group over there. You know, they're a little bit frisky, but I like you very much. So I just want to thank everybody here. You're incredible people. I'm behind you 100%. November 5th, you're going to vote a little earlier than that, but whatever you got to vote. Make sure your vote is secure, because remember, they cheat like hell. Make sure, and again, we win this state, we win the whole thing, and we're going to turn our country around. So thank you very much. Thanks very much, Javier. Thanks.
Cool. I guess no questions from the media. I guess it wasn't a press conference, but guys, I want to kind of go over to some of this stuff on Twitter, because I'm trying to look at these reactions to what's going on Twitter to this RFK Jr. Historical speech, guys. He was tearing up about. It was very smart how he did it, because obviously there are some issues that he probably highly disagrees with Trump on, but all of those issues kind of take don't take precedence to the real issue of what's going on with the Democrat Party censoring people, of our government censoring people, of our mainstream media censoring people. Because if you can't speak out about the issues that you are passionate about. I mean, everything else kind of falls by the wayside. So this is essentially what it looks like, why he is endorsing Trump here. And he kind of used this platform that he had as a way to push some of these issues that he's very passionate about, like the health of people in the United States. And he talked about all these different diseases that are starting to grow in the United States when they're not growing in other countries. And the reason why this is happening, and the fact that if we have a Kamala Harris or a Kamala Harris administration, it's just going to be more of the same, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse. And you can tell he's very passionate about it. He actually started crying about this. He had tears coming down his eyes. I was like, wow, this guy. I knew he was passionate about it, but it was very moving, and it was just an absolute stunning takedown of the mainstream media and the corporate press, the Democrat Party.
At the Palace.
But this is the moment that the media, I guess this is CNN, this is the moment that they actually cut away while he was talking. So watch this. So he looks like he was starting to talk about the media being corrupt, and then they cut away from his speech because this is him talking about CNN, MSNBC. But listen.
Coup against President Biden. The same shadowy DNC operatives appointed his successor, also without an election. They installed a candidate who was so unpopular with voters that she dropped out in 2020 without winning a single delegate. My uncle and my father both relished debate. They prided themselves on their capacity to go toe-to-toe with any opponent in the battle over ideas. They would be astonished to learn of a Democratic Party presidential nominee who, like Vice President Harris, has not appeared in a single interview or an unscripted encounter with voters for 35 days.
We've been listening to independent candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. from Phoenix outlining what led him.
Yeah, that's CYA right there. They're covering their butts. These evil, disgusting corporate media outlets.
A series of complaints about the party.
Guys, you don't understand my dislike for these types.
He's going to endorse former.
You don't understand how much vitriol I have for these propaganda outlets. It's palpable, guys. It's there. One of the big reasons why I have my show on YouTube, because I think it's important to push this out to other people and show them how dishonest they are, how they're using people, they're brainwashing people, they're propagandizing people, they're gaslighting people. They don't care about honesty. They don't care about helping you. They don't care about you. All they care about is power. And just like RFK Jr. said, they are organs of the Democrat Party. Okay. Has it always been this way? No. RFK Jr. himself, this is why he is dropping out or suspending his campaign. He's not a Democrat anymore. Because in the past, it used to be a little bit different. The Democrat Party was the one that was all about liberalism, which meant something different back then. Free speech and free expression, all these other things. Not anymore. It's Frankenstein's monster. But ladies and gentlemen, later tonight, probably around 6 o'clock, I'm going to be doing another live stream where I will be streaming Trump's rally in Glendale, Arizona, where there's supposed to be a special guest appearing. Now, with all this talk about RFK Jr., the rumor is that it's going to be RFK Jr. So that's the rumor. But we don't know that. It could be someone else. It could be Elon Musk. Who knows? It could be Taylor Swift. Maybe it's Beyonce. I don't know. Who is it? Nobody knows. But we'll find out. So make sure if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you subscribe. Hit that notification so you can catch that. Also, I go live 6 days a week. 9 a.m., 6 days a week, I go live. I have a morning show. I talk about all the latest news. I go through topics very quickly. Might add a little bit of my own thoughts on something, but kind of give everybody a view of what happened very quickly. So if you would enjoy something like that, subscribe. If you would like to support the show, consider becoming a member. It's about $5 a month. There's other options too if you want to support more. But that's about a cup of coffee every month, right? From Starbucks with inflation, all right? Maybe cup of coffee at Starbucks is what, $4.75? I don't know. But consider that. Make sure you leave a like on the video before you hop off of here. But ladies and gentlemen, here in just a few hours, I will be hopping back on here to cover that rally with Donald Trump. Thanks for hanging out with me today. We'll see you very soon. God bless.